So, welcome everyone. I know I met Casey. I don't know if I met any of the other participants today. Um, so, I'm from Argentina originally. So, we're going to be making Argentine style empanadas. Mike, are you Filipino or something like I guessed it right. Yeah, so you may know that empanadas come from Spain. So everywhere that was invaded by Spain essentially has empanadas. In Argentina, I don't know about the Philippines. I know in Mexico, for example, they make empanadas using masa harina. In Argentina, empanadas. Yeah, go ahead. Definitely. I know that there's empanadas like in Colombia, in Mexico, everywhere. But the thing is that in Argentina, they kind of took off, like a couple of other things that came from Spain, from England. We just made them our own. And so in Argentina, you can eat empanadas anywhere. It's like there's like an empanada shop like in every block just about. And most people don't know how to make the dough. So that's why I sent you the dough today because you just buy it already made. You can buy it anywhere in the kiosk, in the 7-Eleven, just everywhere they have the dough. So our task today is actually to make the fillings. We're going to make two very traditional Argentine fillings. It's going to be a beef filling and then it's going to be a spinach and bechamel. So I sent you all the ingredients to do that, and the first thing we need to do is we need to make all that because it needs to cool down before we can actually fill the empanadas. And then I will show you a couple of different ways that we make the empanadas after we're ready to do that. So the first thing we want to do, we want to put a drop of oil on each of these in a pot and in a pan. I'm just going to take a little bit of oil. So you have a bottle of oil, you can just take a couple of drops of that, turn this on at medium heat, and then what we're gonna do, we're gonna cook half of the onions on each one. Here we're gonna make the beef filling, and here we're gonna make the spinach filling. So I'm gonna just grab all my onions, and I'm gonna put half of them, doesn't have to be very precise, half of them here in my pan, and the other half here in my pot. A little bit of oil here so that they'll stick to the bottom, just to give them a head start. So, so the onions are divided. The red bell peppers are all gonna go into the pot. The onions on both, red bell peppers in the pot only. So the red bell peppers go there now, all of them, and then what we wanna do, we wanna salt this very lightly, just a pinch of salt on each one, and then we're gonna start stirring this. You have a question, Casey? Yeah, 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 of course. Of course. Yeah, no problem. On your pot, low heat, medium low heat, and then you put your onions in both of these things, in both the pot and the pan, and the bell peppers only in the pot. Only in the pot. You see, my onions are alone here in the pan. Here, I'm gonna cook my spinach, and here I'm gonna cook my beef. So we're doing this at very low heat. The idea is for this not to brown. We just simply want to cook them very lightly, get them to release some of their water. That's why we put salt. The salt takes water from inside the vegetable and it just lets it, comes to the surface and then it can evaporate. It's a technique called sweating. Very important technique for all of cooking, really. So just a little bit, you know, we're gonna wait until they're softer. I'm using a spoon that goes between both of them. Once I put raw meat in my pot, I don't want to use the same spoon for both. So I have two spoons ready. You don't need to really worry too much about moving them too much, just once in a while to make sure everything has a chance to cook evenly. Can everybody hear me okay? Yep. Good. So, so if my onions start sticking a little bit, I'm gonna go ahead and put another little bit of oil. Don't want everything to stick. So again, this is called sweating. It's because, you know, when we sweat, which I'm doing a lot of that now because it's 80 degrees in my place, we evaporate water, and that's what we want to do. We want to evaporate water from inside of the veggies so they concentrate their flavor. The idea here is not to change the flavor as we do if we were browning them, but to concentrate their natural flavors. Once the onions are shiny, kind of like softer, a little more translucent, I'm there with my onions. For whatever reason, my pot is not there yet. I'm gonna cook it then at a little higher temperature just to make sure I can make it a little faster. How are you doing, Jesse? Okay, good. This salt that we put in is not for flavor. It really is only for us to allow the water to evaporate from inside. Process called osmosis that you may remember from biology or chemistry. So I don't want my veggies to burn. So I am ready to put my spinach. I am gonna go ahead and put it in. You don't have to, just wait until your onions are ready. I need to do it because otherwise my stuff will burn. So I'm gonna put all the spinach in there. I'm gonna salt this lightly before it cooks, just a little bit of salt. And I'm gonna use my second spoon to mix the spinach around with my onions. And then I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the heat in my spinach and cover it. So it's basically gonna cook from its own heat. So my heat is off in my spinach right now. The onions are gonna be softer and more translucent. They're gonna change their color a little bit. And the same thing in the pot. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my meat to the pot. And Casey, I'm sorry if I'm going fast, but I later we can wait. Okay, good. Just that there's a rhythm to cooking, you know, so it's hard for me to stop. I can always wait for you. So the meat I wanna do at medium low heat. I wanna mix it with the onions and bell peppers, and I wanna cook them very lightly. I just want to remove the pink from the meat. And so what I want to do, I want to push the meat so there's no lumps in there. So very gently. We don't want the meat to dry up. And it will not dry up essentially because the meat that we're using has a pretty high fat content. It's a 20% fat content. And so that's fundamental for the empanadas to be very juicy. Empanadas need to be very juicy. If they aren't, it's not going to be a good eating experience. And so the fat that's in the meat right now, that's going to actually render out, but we're going to keep it in the pot. We are not going to drain it because that's going to play a fundamental part in our empanadas. It's going to do two things for us. First of all, when we cool the empanada filling, the beef filling, that's going to congeal. It's going to go back to a solid. So that's going to allow us to form the empanada filling really well. But it's also going to do another thing that's really important to me, and it is that once we cook the empanada, that fat is going to go back to a liquid. It's going to be trapped by the dough. So the empanada is going to remain really moist inside. That's really, really important. So feel free to raise your heat a little bit if you need to so that the meat can cook. And again, we're not browning it, we're just keeping it as pure as possible. All I'm doing here is I'm pushing in the meat so there's no lumps, and I want to make sure I mix it well with my onions and my bell peppers. So there we are with that. Now I want to add my wine. So add all the wine that I gave you. And the first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna evaporate the alcohol. So we wanna put this at medium high heat to allow the alcohol to evaporate. Whenever I'm cooking with an alcoholic beverage, I want to evaporate the alcohol. It's not for the alcohol, it's for the taste that I'm using the alcoholic beverage. So I want to remove the alcohol. And so to accomplish that, I never put it mixed with other liquids. I always put my alcoholic beverage before I add any other liquid. That way I'm giving it maximum chance for the alcohol to evaporate. And what we need to do with this, we need to smell it. That's what's going to tell us that the alcohol has evaporated. So I'm going to smell it. It's still very alcoholic. I almost just got drunk with the alcohol that's coming out. Not a good thing when I'm teaching. Or maybe it's better. I don't know. Maybe it'll be more fun if I'm a little drunk. Who knows? And so I'm just going to let the alcohol evaporate. Still a little alcoholic. I still almost got another whiff of alcohol through my left side of my nose. After the meat is no longer pink, which should be by now, probably you're probably there. So now my alcohol has evaporated. I'm gonna go ahead and put in my chicken stock in there, all of the little bottle I gave you. What we're gonna do with this, we're gonna let it evaporate all its liquid except of course for the fat. The fat does not evaporate, the fat will remain liquid, but we're trying to reduce all the water that is in the wine and in the chicken stock. So by doing so, go ahead. Go- Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I did not use a fish stock for this. You know, it has to be more neutral than that. The ideal thing to use actually would be veal stock. Veal stock is a very expensive ingredient, really difficult to make. Actually, takes a couple of days to make a proper veal stock. So the second best option for me is chicken stock because it's thick, it has enough flavor, you know. And what we're doing here, if you think about it, we're doing three reductions. Reduction means when you evaporate water from an ingredient to concentrate its flavor. So we reduce the water in the onions and bell peppers, then we reduce the alcohol and some of the water in the wine, and now we're reducing the chicken stock or whatever stock we are using. That's concentrating the flavor. It's going to make everything more flavorful. And at the same time, go ahead, question? Yeah, it's always important for me to understand what I'm doing. When I read a recipe and I don't understand the purpose of a step, I need to go and research. I need to know why I'm doing whatever I'm doing because a couple of things. First of all, it allows me to be a little freer in the kitchen. And second, I don't have to be so stuck to a recipe because if I know the steps and I know what to accomplish, I can modify stuff. So at this point, we want to put another pinch of salt in the meat. So we start flavoring it. Eventually, we're going to evaporate all the water from there. And then we're going to put this meat concoction in a bowl. And then we're going to cover it and put it in the freezer. And then, so because I don't know how many pots people have at home, I have 30 pots, a lot of pots here. So, what we're going to do to be economical, after the meat is done, we're going to wash that pot and we're going to make our bechamel in there. So, just watch it as the water evaporates. It's a little bit confusing if you are not used to seeing this. There's going to be still liquid in your pot, and that liquid is going to be the fat that's rendered out. But the water will evaporate. And so as you do this, you're going to see how it's going to start boiling faster and faster and faster. But there's going to be left a little bit of liquid behind that's going to be kind of yellowy. That's going to be the fat. I'm going to actually accelerate my process slightly to make it go a little faster. So I can see how now all of a sudden, not only because I increased my temperature, also with less water, the same amount of heat is going to give you a different effect. And so it's going to start boiling harder and harder, which is perfectly fine. Just make sure nothing burns. So for that, we just stir it once in a while. Don't stir it too much. So you stir too much, you're cooling things down. So we don't want things to cool down. We just want all this beautiful vapor to come out. I don't know if this is vapor or actually steam. There's one that is invisible. I think vapor is invisible, steam is not invisible. Anyways, we see all this water evaporation, all this smoke. That's what we're looking for. We're almost there. Okay. Okay. Right. And then go ahead and turn it up a bit so that that way you can evaporate a little faster. Yeah. In Argentina, there's all kinds of fillings that we make. It's very regional also. There's regions of Argentina, like for example, in the north of Argentina, that's close to Peru, Bolivia, which is where potatoes originated. Sometimes they put potatoes in this filling. Some people like to put olives. Some people like to put raisins. Some people do away with the meat altogether. They use fish from their region. A tuna empanada, it's really, really great. Are you familiar, Mike, with empanada gallega from Spain? Did you ever have that? Yeah, so that's with tuna inside. But this, they also make it just the regular way that we're gonna make it today. Anyhow, my water now is really like there's very little left. I can see in the bottom of my pot. So if I move my pot around, the water moves right in, and I'm starting to see how the liquid is turning a little yellowy, I'm gonna make sure to break up all these lumps as good as I can. So if you look at my pot, there's very little liquid left down there, and all of it is very thick. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off as well. And I'm gonna go ahead and put all of this into a bowl. If you have a metal bowl, it's actually better because then that's gonna transmit heat much faster. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna put it in the freezer, which is not really the best cooking technique to put something hot in the freezer. But today we kind of don't have a choice because we need to go very fast. So I'm just gonna cover this with plastic wrap. The proper technique is to actually cool this with ice. So what we do is we put this bowl into a larger bowl with ice and water, and then we move things around. Today we're making a very small amount, so it's not gonna really affect anything in your freezer. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in my freezer, and then I'm gonna wash my pot. So I'm washing my pot. So now I'm gonna wait because I know people are doing stuff. Even as you are doing stuff, I can tell you what the process is gonna be. We are going to cool both of these. I mean, we're gonna make a bechamel sauce. I'll teach you how to do that. We're gonna mix that with the spinach. We're gonna put that to cool down also in the freezer, and then we're gonna assemble the empanadas. The empanadas, we're gonna assemble them, finishing them in two different ways. In Argentina, there's a thing called el repulgue, which is the border of the empanadas, the decoration on the empanada. Whatever that decoration looks like will tell somebody who knows, an Argentine, for example, what's inside. So we're gonna make a very typical beef empanada repulgue and a very typical vegetable empanada repulgue. El repulgue, again, something you need to be able to roll your R's to say. Kind of like if you are doing paella, you need to know what socarrat means. So el repulgue, very, very characteristic word. And I'm gonna show you both. We're gonna make them both. And then we have the choice of deep frying these empanadas or putting them in the oven. I suggest we do both so you can see what the difference is between one and the other. But we don't need to worry about that yet. Actually, what we should do is we should turn on the oven at 375 so it's ready for us to go. For deep frying, I don't want to do anything yet. 375, yes. 375. So for the for the deep frying, you have about 2 cups of oil. So you can either use the same pot we're using now or a smaller pot. The smaller, the better, because 2 cups is not a lot. The empanadas cannot be pan fried. They need to be deep fried. So they need to be floating inside the oil. I'll show you how to do it very safely and very healthy also. The way I fry them at high temperature, and so the oil does not have a chance to penetrate into the empanada. So you'll be surprised if you do it at the proper temperature how non-oily this empanada is going to be, and it's so much better than the oven one, in my opinion. So I'll teach you all that. I'll show you how to do it safely so you don't burn yourself. And there's a couple of things to consider to make sure that your pot doesn't overflow. How you doing? Yeah, that's okay. Take your time. There's no rush. The point is to have a good time. very little, and it also be very thick and kind of yellowy. The fat does not evaporate because the fat does not boil. You know, what boils when you put something in fat is actually the water that's in your element, which, by the way, is what prevents oil from entering the empanada. When we put the empanada into a deep oil, uh, the water inside the dough will instantly boil and be expelled. So you will see there's going to be a very big, like, boiling water out. So that prevents the oil from entering your empanada. That's why the empanadas are going to be crispy and not greasy. So let me know, Casey, when you're ready. We'll proceed with the bechamel. The bechamel essentially is thickened milk. What's going to thicken the milk is flour, but we begin the process by melting the flour into melted butter or dissolving the flour into melted butter. That way it's not going to form lumps. That's called a roux, R-O-U-X. You may have heard of roux, like in the South, when they make their gambos, their jambalayas, it starts with a dark roux. Today we're making a blonde roux. So we don't want to really toast the flour. We're just going to cook it very gently. And then we're going to dump our milk in there. That's going to thicken the milk. And then we're going to add some cheese. And then we're going to mix that into the spinach. So you need to have your butter ready, your flour, and your milk. And salt, of course. There's always salt involved. The reason we salt, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. Okay. So you want to, that's good. The fat will always be stay there. That's what we want. And so then you want to put it into a bowl, cover it, and put it in the fridge or the freezer, and then your pot or get another pot if you prefer. How are you doing, Mike? You look like super relaxed, and you must be ahead of the time. Yeah. I'm there. What's that? Okay, great. So turn your heat at medium low. Put your butter. You have a tablespoon of butter. We're gonna let it melt. So let it melt. Don't brown it. We want to really keep it very blonde. We're gonna let it melt completely. And then we're gonna add the flour little by little. We're gonna add a teaspoon of flour at a time to make sure that it doesn't create lumps. So you have a packet of flour, I believe, that I gave you. That has another tablespoon of flour. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a teaspoon at a time into my butter and mix it. That's the best way to do it. Yeah, that's the best way because doing it from the bowl, from the packet, is really hard. After I put my first teaspoon of flour, I put my second one and I mix it. So my butter is getting thicker. I'm gonna go ahead and put the rest of my flour in there. Now the butter and flour got thick. So here goes all my milk. So what's gonna happen is that the flour will expand as it gets hot, and that's gonna thicken your milk. You know how heat makes things expand. And so what happens is at the molecular level, the flour gets bigger, and so it makes the molecules of H2O that are in the milk more difficult to move around. So that's what makes your milk thicken, and it happens relatively quickly. And it doesn't happen until the milk gets hot. So if you want to take a look at my pot, you see that, it's pretty thick now. It's not a liquid anymore. I want to go ahead and make this cheesy. So when we put cheese in a bechamel, we turn it into another sauce, a derivative from bechamel, which is called Mornay. So we're making a Mornay sauce. That's neither here nor there. It's just a French way of calling things. So now I have a pretty thick mixture in there. I'm gonna turn off my heat. So my off. And then I wanna taste this and make adjustments for salt. One thing I wanted to mention from earlier is that when we salt things, we're not looking to make them taste salty. We're looking for them not to be bland. Salt has this amazing capacity of waking up our taste buds so they can taste other flavors as well. And so never salt for saltiness, salt for non-blandness. So we always do it little by little. Once you make something over salty, you cannot go back, So that's the idea, is to do it little by little. That's it. The cheese and then the salt. So I'm gonna taste it again. I think I talked about this last time. Casey took a pizza class with me, I believe. So probably mentioned this. There's a chef in Italy. His name is Massimo Bottura. He talks about the most important instrument in your kitchen being your taste buds. So you need to taste everything you make. That's the most important thing you can do in the kitchen. Forget a recipe, just taste everything you make adjustments. So this has to be non-bland. I need a little bit more. And I'm gonna taste it until I'm satisfied with the taste. Notice what I'm doing. I'm using 2 spoons. One goes into my mouth. The other one never goes into the pot. That's because of cross contamination. Don't want anybody to actually get contaminated with my germs in my mouth. Think it's fine. Look at that's what we want. Go ahead. Yeah, just keep it because the bechamel is gonna take the place of the fat in the meat. It's gonna allow the um, the spinach to stay together. So speaking about the spinach, I'm gonna uncover it now. It's already cooked. So I believe all your spinach is already chopped. And so what I wanna do now, I wanna go ahead and mix the bechamel into my spinach. I've been talking about this a lot. Now it's a little too late for the same comparison I was making when my daughter was pregnant, which was until 2 months ago. I have 2-month-old grandchild. She was craving my bechamel and spinach empanadas, and she was asking me to make them really creamy. She liked creaminess in them. But my girlfriend is a semi-vegetarian, so when I make it for her, I will make it more about the spinach, less about the creaminess. Point is that you can put as much bechamel into this spinach mixture as you want. My suggestion is to put a little bit of the bechamel into the spinach, mix it around, and then decide if you want more or less. I want more in mine, so here it goes. I put a little bit more on mine. And then I have, well, let's just wait until we put this in the fridge. So I'm gonna put my pot in the wash. This bechamel that we just made, if you have any extra, you can use it. You can mix it with macaroni. You're gonna make the best macaroni and cheese ever. It's really a very like usable sauce. It's one of the five mother sauces from French cooking. All I can think of is Italian food to make with this. You can use it for your lasagna. You can use it for there's a thing called the croque madame, in which they put more cheese into a bechamel and then they put that into a sandwich and then they toast it. That's called a croque madame. It's just amazing, amazingly versatile. Let's give it one more taste and then make final adjustments. It's perfect. So we're also gonna put this in the freezer, just like we did, with the meat filling. So metal bowls, if you ever have a chance, get some. They're easier to deal with, and they transmit heat much more easily. So a metal bowl will allow your things to cool down much quicker than if you had a ceramic bowl. So I'm gonna again cover this. It's going into my freezer. So generally speaking, we cook this the day before. We cook a lot of it. We don't make 5, 6 empanadas or 8 empanadas like we're making today. In general, we make empanadas for a party, and so we make triple the amount of filling that we made today. We let it cool in the freezer overnight, and then sorry, in the refrigerator overnight. Today we're putting it into the freezer, which is not the best idea, but it's okay for today. So then go ahead and either get another pot or wash the pot that you have, and then you have 2 cups of oil. It's a cooking oil. It's a canola oil, I believe, the one I gave you. Make sure that it doesn't go beyond half of your pot. This is really fundamental for safety. If it goes to beyond half of your pot, once you put your empanadas, they're gonna overflow. And you don't want that. That could be a dangerous situation. So half of your pot. Perfect. That's like mine. So it shouldn't be too large because then your empanadas are gonna touch the bottom too much. It shouldn't be too small. But most people pots are about a quart, the small ones. So a quart, you put 2 cups, that's half a quart, then you are leaving half of your pot untouched. Right. So don't really want to start heating this up yet because it could get overheated really quickly. We want to watch that. I'm gonna cook my empanadas at 375 degrees. And if you don't have a thermometer, I'm gonna show you what you're gonna be looking for. So you want the oil to be really hot. We're gonna dip the empanada a little bit, and we're gonna see for bubbling, and that's gonna tell you the temperature. So we'll get to that point in a minute. Don't fret over that. What we wanna do now is we wanna start making our empanadas, so we need to get the dough out. So let's actually open the envelope where the dough is. These are called tapas. So the word tapas has the same. I mean, have you familiar with empanadas tapas? I'm sorry, wrong word. With Spanish tapas, in which you go to a bar and they give you small dishes. They both come from the same word. It means to cover, from the verb tapar. So these are covers for the empanadas. That's what they're called, tapas. So what we want to do, let's start like little by little. Mine are still a little frozen. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put, for now, just two of them on our counter, like this. And we're gonna actually begin with, the spinach empanadas because they're easier to make. I want you to gain some confidence with this. The empanadas tapas, I made them myself. They're a very simple dough with just butter, water, and flour. So if you're interested, I can send you a recipe or I can put it on the chat, a link to my empanada dough recipe. So we're gonna put them here like so. We need one more thing. We need a little bowl with water. Literally a small bowl is fine. And we're gonna use it to make sure the empanada adheres to itself. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring my spinach filling. I wanna have everything ready to go. And we're making these pretty small size empanadas. They're like medium size. So they only take about a teaspoon or so of filling, just for the didactic purposes or for ease of explanation. I'm gonna define some terms here. You will see how they make sense. Let's think of the empanada as if it was the Earth, the globe, has an equator in the middle, and then it has a North Pole and a South Pole, and then it also has the tropics between the equator and the North and the South Pole. You see this stuff really silly, but it's gonna make sense. So what we're gonna do, we wanna put about a teaspoon of this spinach filling on the equator. Don't get too ambitious. Don't put too much. It's gonna be difficult to work with it. I'm gonna do that on both of my empanadas. Just perhaps a little bit more here. And then I'm gonna super lightly wet my finger and then rub it off on the border because I don't want too much. And I'm gonna go ahead and put a little bit of water on the north hemisphere, on the outside of the north hemisphere. Just one side. So that's gonna allow the dough to stick to itself. Now I'm gonna grab the north and the south pole on one of the empanadas. And then I'm gonna stretch it a little bit. And then I'm gonna close this thing up top like this. And then carefully, I'm gonna close the tropic area, the Capricorn and the, what's the other tropic? I don't remember. So then I'm gonna go ahead and trying to push as much air as I can from inside the empanada. I'm gonna go ahead and close the whole thing. Make sure that it's nicely closed. And then I'm gonna repeat with my second empanada. So again, You can do this whole thing actually on your hands. It's a little easier once you get familiar with it. You just put it like this, then you just wet your finger, and then everything is already in your hand. So we stretch the poles just a little bit, close the two tropics, and then we go ahead and close the whole empanada. So I promise that there's a special way that we serve a vegetable empanada. It's gonna look a bit like a Chinese dumpling. So usually we put it flat on its tummy. See how this one is laying on its side? What we wanna do, we wanna put it flat on its tummy and press down a bit. So you see the difference between this and this. This is flat on its tummy. And then I wanna make a decoration to this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab it with my index and my thumb on each hand, and I'm gonna put one hand, doesn't matter which one, behind the other. So I'm like bending my dough, and then I'm gonna go like that, and then close really well. I'm gonna repeat that twice. See how that looks like a Chinese dumpling? So, okay, so you do that two more times. Make sure it's nicely closed, and then I'm gonna put it on a tray. Repeat with this one. So I'm gonna put it down on its tummy, then hold with both my hands, put one behind the other, then press really well, and two more times per side. So a total of 5 times. Yeah, right. And you will see when they when we fry them, it's the best because then they're gonna start getting all these little blisters in the dough. Each blisters is a pocket of goodness. Never, no. Didn't know such things existed. Okay, so this I have one piece of my tapas that is ruined because I didn't roast it properly. So easiest way to do is to peel the whole paper that they are wrapped with. I wish these were a little less cold. So I'm gonna go ahead and do my other two of these ones, and then now that you know you can make this, we're gonna go and move to the beef empanadas that are quite a bit harder. But I'm gonna show you two ways to do them. One is very easy. The other one requires some skill. It's called la trenza, which means the braid. So we're gonna do another repulgue for the beef empanada that is very characteristic. So for now, let's just go ahead and finish this. If you have extra filling left over, like I do, you can again freeze it again. That should be fine. So I'm gonna do the whole thing on my hand. Just put it on my hand like that. Then just wet the outside, stretch, and then close it really, really well. So try to work as cleanly as you can. I always have a paper towel with me and a kitchen towel to make sure that I stay very clean. So a little bit of water goes a long way with closing them. I was over ambitious here with the amount of filling I put in, so I'm having a hard time closing it. So try not to make that mistake. Because if I have filling in between, my closing area, it's a good chance the empanada will explode or at least open up. So then again, I'm gonna go ahead and form both of these. For now, we're gonna just put them on a tray. Later, we'll prepare them to put them in the oven. So make sure they're very well closed. All right. So then I'm gonna go ahead and get going with the preparation for the beef empanadas. Just gonna put a few of them here. Empanadas, the tapas have so much butter in them that you should make sure they're not super hot. If they get difficult to work with, go ahead and put them back in the refrigerator so they can cool down a little bit. So that's all you need to be aware of. Mine are still a little too cold actually, and probably when I vacuum pack them, I over vacuum them. They're sticking a bit to each other. So I'm gonna go ahead and put all of mine in here. Now I'm gonna bring my beef filling. And the process all starts exactly the same. You can see that the fat in some cases will have separated. You want to go ahead and mix all that really well. And then the process is the same. We're going to take a spoon or so of this, put it on in the center of our empanada. Let's just do one at a time so I can show you the different techniques. How's everyone doing, by the way? Your spinach empanadas are all done? Great. So here we do the same as before. We just begin by closing them. And I'll show you a very easy way that is perfectly acceptable, is what most people in Argentina do. Just use a fork to decorate the edge. I'll show you. So we just close it like this, just like we did before. And then we just use a fork to make sure that we give the edge more strength. So I'm just gonna press with my fork like so. This one generally is reserved for like a ham and cheese empanada, but it's okay to use it for any kind of empanada, it's fine. So now my empanada has more areas where the dough can be in touch with each other, because we basically increase the surface area, and it's also a little stronger. So I'm gonna put that aside, and then for the for the more difficult thing, I go ahead and do one by one so I can show you clearly what I'm doing. So I always have a kitchen towel with me, make sure I don't mess anything up. I'm gonna just grab my empanada like this. Oops. And then just close it just the way we did the other ones. That's all the same. The difference is that the decoration, the repulgue, as I was mentioning, is gonna look like a braid. And it's a little difficult to do. I have a YouTube video in which I'm doing it at a quarter of the speed, so I'll share that link with you later on so you can see it. Sure. So here's what I do. My empanada is like this, is parallel to my wrist. The flat side facing my wrist, the curved side facing out. Then I just go like that. I grab the edge of the empanada with my thumb and my finger on one hand. My other hand folds over my thumb. Then my thumb releases and I pinch again, and then I fold again. While I do that, my fingers in the bottom are rotating the empanada. So my empanada, I'm always doing this this movement in the same direction. So again, I fold, so the proper wording. I pinch, fold, release, and then I pinch again. Pinch, fold, release. And so I just keep going with this until I get to the edge of the empanada. So in the end, it looks like that. So it's called la trenza or the braid. I'll do it. I have three more empanadas here. I can show you one more time. And then I'll share the quarter speed video before we go. Remind me if in case I forget. Because I believe that seeing it in slow motion really helps people understanding what I'm doing. Because then you can see what every one of my fingers is doing. So again, the first thing is to close the empanada in the normal way. Make sure it's very well closed. And then I start by pinching with my thumb and my forefinger. My other hand just falls over my thumb. My thumb keeps repeating the same thing. Just keeps releasing and pinching again. Finally, I have two more. Well, sorry, say that again. Yeah, empanada, braided empanadas like these are always a beef empanada. If I look at the empanada that looks like this, I know it's gonna be a beef empanada. Yeah. In Argentina, I don't know other cultures. So sometimes you go to an Argentine empanada place and they have their own little codes. So they give you a little paper and they tell you, if this is a cheese empanada, this is the way it's going to look. Because very often we buy like 3 dozen empanadas because we have the whole family watching a soccer match or friends or whatever, you know. And so then they give you that code because every store has a slightly different way. But this one, always a beef empanada. They have more exotic things inside and they will, design their own. Right. Beef, the bread is always beef, always. So I am being ambitious here. I put a little more filling than on the other ones. Let's see how that works. Nowadays, people are using machines to do this. I absolutely despise that. I like the empanadas that are made by hand. The machines just look like they came from a factory, you know? And it's getting more and more common, even in Argentina. I will stay away from a place like that. I like the more artisanal quality, you know? But yeah, the thing is that if those people are putting up 4,000 empanadas a day, it makes sense that they'll be using a machine, you know? And it makes sense that I don't need to eat them. So sorry. I'm very particular about that. Right. Actually, I'm going to do this one on the table because the meat is still not completely congealed. If you want to make this a little easier on yourself, you could actually create little balls of meat, beforehand, before you do the empanada, and so that way all you have to do is just grab it and put it on the tapa, so that we make it a little easier or faster. And generally, if you're gonna be serving this to your family, everybody participates. It's like in Italy, when they're gonna eat tortelloni, all the children get there and they make the tortelloni. All right. So again, if you wanna see this again, I'm gonna do it at the proper speed. In general, you wanna do this pretty quickly so things don't fall apart. So like this. So once you get good at this, you can make many of these very, very quickly. Exactly. I look at it more of like it's beautiful to cook together, you know? Okay, so now here's the difference for the oven empanadas for the frying empanadas. For the oven empanadas, we want to go ahead and paint them with a bit of egg wash. I'm gonna separate most of mine. I'm gonna do in the fryer, but I will leave a couple to do in the oven. So this one more than likely is gonna be oven. One, two, three, four, five. I'm gonna make four in the oven. Actually, yeah, something so they don't stick. So I have a seal pad, which is the same as parchment paper, but nothing sticks to it. What I want to do with this, either with a pastry brush or with your fingers, I actually prefer my fingers. We're going to use some of this egg wash and paint the surface of the empanada with the egg wash. This is so that they will get a little more brown, a little more beautiful. So try to do it so it's not overdone, but at least make sure that you go over the entire empanada. Go to other empanadas and then come back. It's kind of like painting a wall. You don't want to put your whole coat all at once. So again, these are gonna, the egg wash again is only for the oven empanadas. Be forewarned, the spinach empanadas have a tendency to burst in the oven. So it might not be a bad idea to go ahead and like prick it a little bit with a fork. Make sure you get some steam releasing there. And even doing that, there's a lot of steam that forms in the oven empanadas. So this might still burst. So again, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go over the empanadas one more time with the egg wash and make sure that I have a nice coat. Then prick only, really only the spinach empanadas. The other ones don't have a problem. This is going into the oven just like this. I'm just correcting the shape here because when I painted, I changed the shape a bit. So it goes into the oven, 375, about about 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, depends. So now I am gonna start heating my oil, medium high heat. And I do have a thermometer, so I'm gonna check my temperature. It's a very small amount of oil, so it's gonna take no time to heat up. If you have a thermometer, that's the best. It's the best way to do it. So once we start doing it, I'll show you what to look for. So while this happens, I'm gonna go ahead and look at my slow motion video. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy the link to the slow motion video into the chat. So make sure you save this, and if you lose it, just let me know later on. I'll send it to you again. I'm also gonna put the a link to my own website with the recipe for the dough. So in case you decide you wanna do it, you can. What I have in my website, I believe, is kind of like a little more sophisticated dough than this one is a semi-laminated dough. Let me just take a look. Yeah, so this one is a little more involved, but really worth knowing it. I used to do this class where we made the dough from scratch, but I realized that it takes way too long. Most people, couldn't handle it. But you have the recipe there, so you can go ahead and try it on your own. So I'm looking for my oil to be at 375. Just trying to get it going very quickly here. You need to use an oil that can withstand that temperature. It's gonna take a while for mine to get to that temperature. Meanwhile, do you have any questions? What's that? Hmm. Yeah, my daughter told me that she doesn't like to see those balls there, so I had to redo that one. So never cover your oil, you know. That's a recipe for an accident. Just let it do its thing. It's not like water where you can cover it, and then just once it boils, you can reduce the temperature. Here, it's better to just let it go little by little. If you cover, when you uncover it, you could actually create a fire. So don't want to do that. So I'm gonna wait a little longer for 375. The good news is that the empanadas in the fryer take anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes most, whereas in the oven they take much longer. So I'm almost there. Yeah, so it's at 375. So I want you to take a look now. You need something, of course, to remove them from there. So when I put my empanada in, I'm gonna just hold it like this and then just dip it there. Just see if I'm getting bubbling. I'm getting bubbling right away. That tells me I'm at the right temperature. There, when I drop it away from me, so it falls and splashes away from me. And I'm not gonna put more than two at the same time in a small pot like this. So again, I'm just putting it there, waiting for that bubbling, and then drop it. And what I wanna do, I wanna move them around to make sure they cook evenly. So I'm gonna just keep turning them so they cook evenly on both sides. You can see already in mine all these blisters that are happening there. They're really, really beautiful. And they really give a good crunch to the empanada. So I'm gonna keep moving them around. Again, all this extreme hot heat water that's coming out of the empanada, creating that boiling, is preventing the oil from entering the crust. By the time that bubbling subsides, like it has here now, the crust has formed, and then the empanada will not accept in the interior any more oil. So this is done. It's a little bright on the camera, but here it looks a little more brown than what I can see on the camera. So I'm gonna say this one is done. I'm gonna take it out and put it on a grate like this one. So whatever oil is on the outside in the crevices or whatever has a chance to drain out. So I took one out. I'm gonna go ahead and put my second one in. This one I wanna cook a little longer. So I'm moving it around to make sure that it has a chance to cook evenly. So this one is totally done. Taking it out. So as I take them out, I start putting a new one in. Be aware that when you put something cold that comes from our room temperature into the oil is going to cool down. So don't overcrowd your oil. And if you notice cooling down, just adjust your temperature so you get a 375 oil all the time. Look at that bubble there. That's huge. That's really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and put my last one in. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at my oven ones. So if you don't have a grate like this, you can just use paper towels just to drain whatever excess oil there is on the outside. This oil can be reused, by the way, several times, so it's never wasted. You can use it for, you know, maybe 5, 6, 10 times, something like that. We're not getting to the smoking point of the oil, which means that's the point in which the oil starts decaying. Of course, you don't want to fry fish on this and then fry empanadas, you know. Just keep it all within the same family. Okay, so that's done. So in the oven, we're looking for the dough to be cooked. You know, the inside is cooked in both cases. So we're gonna wait until they are a little golden. They're gonna look very different from this. This one look very puffy. The ones in the oven are gonna be smoother on the outside. And it's a different texture. It's not, I mean, in my opinion, this is better than the other ones, but they are both like I'd say 80% of the empanadas in Argentina are made in the oven. Very few are made frying, and for me, the frying ones are way, way better. Yeah. But you're gonna have to test that with your own oven. Eventually, like make some adjustments next time you make these. They're all 375. 375, yes. That's a perfect temperature to deep fry anything, really. Um, I like tuna empanadas, actually. Yeah, I make empanadas using a special tuna that comes from Spain or from Italy. That's called ventrisca. Sorry, I'm adjusting my phone here. Give me a second. Ventrisca, yeah, that means it's made with the belly of the tuna. Oh, yeah, it's the best. And so when you make it with tuna, you want to use more of the. Let's see, this is pointing up to the ceiling. Sorry, trying to adjust my phone. Now you can see my ass only. There, more or less, there we are. So yeah, so when you're making it with tuna, just try to find that ventricsca. Especially if it comes from Italy or from Spain. It's the belly of the tuna, and then you want to use mostly red bell pepper, or if you can have in Spain, if you've been to Spain, the pimientos del piquillo, like those are roasted bell peppers. So you want to use those in your ventricsca empanadas, and you don't want to cook tuna; you just put it inside. Uh, just a little bit. Depends on your what's the word? Your tolerance for heat. What we do very often, if you have children, for example, you just take off both sides, just crack the side a little bit, and then the parents will blow into the empanada so the kid does not get burned. That's very typical in Argentina. But be careful, it's gonna be hot. So my empanadas in the oven are taking their sweet time. To me, the oven is a more difficult proposition. The empanadas will have a tendency more to burst inside. They're a little harder to maintain. You can also decide to take them out earlier. Like some of them are, these are done. This one is done. I think mine are all done actually. So, for example, this one, something happened, the dough broke a bit. So as you see the difference between this and this, these are way smoother, so they will give you a completely different mouth feel when you eat them. The nice thing about this one is to let them rest a little longer than the fried empanadas, because then the right now the crust is really hard, but when it cools down a little bit, it's gonna get soft. It's gonna be more pleasant to eat when it's just slightly cool. You don't want to eat it straight out of the oven. The empanadas themselves. No, I meant the fillings themselves. Yeah. The empanadas, what I do with them, I can't eat all the empanadas or all the pizza I make. And so I freeze them. I vacuum pack them actually, and then freeze them. And then I just, after they're cooked, I don't want to freeze them before they're cooked. Then they're ever come back to life. So I just freeze them and then I distribute it among, my family members here in San Francisco. Uh, Probably in a very medium low temperature oven. So probably an oven at 300 degrees. Just let them just come up to temperature normally. So not for too long. And I do it, I probably either just let them thaw before I put them in the oven. But that's a little dangerous because if you let them thaw, sometimes the dough will start sticking. Actually, that's not true. In these ones that are already cooked, you won't have that problem. Let them thaw a little bit and then put them in the oven at 300 degrees for maybe 10 minutes or so. Especially if they're thawed, even less, 5 minutes should be enough. I have a vacuum packer, so I like to vacuum pack them. But what I do is I freeze them first and then I vacuum pack them because then the vacuum packer is not going to crush them. But if you have baggies, just make sure that most of the air is pushed out. So you just like do like keep like pushing the air out and then close it. Because the enemy for anything to be frozen is the water, from the moisture from the air that's going to start producing crystalline things. And so that's going to ruin your stuff. So, if you don't have a vacuum packer, probably a month, that's about it. More than that, you're going to start getting bad. If you have a vacuum packer, you can leave them there for 6 months, so it's going to be fine. But if you're going to use a vacuum packer, if you eventually end up getting one, you want to make sure that you let them freeze first. Otherwise, if you put them like this in a vacuum packer, the vacuum packer is going to crush them. How did yours turn out, Mike? Hmm. Good. Great. Hmm. Yeah, I really like the fried empanadas because they're quick. One thing. But I really, really like this micro texture that I have here. Just like little, aside from the big blisters, sometimes you get these very small blisters. Those are really give you a really nice feeling when you bite into it. It's almost like eating croissant, you know? Not that bad, right? You just have to be careful not to overflow your pot. And then again, always make sure that when you drop the empanada or whatever you're frying, just drop it away from you. Plus, That's fine too. With empanadas, one thing you can do, what I mentioned before, you can just break off the edge on both sides, and you can just blow away from it. That's gonna water away, you know. But we only reserve that for children. But we are all children, you know, so fine to do it. Yeah, so I am actually recording all of this. The only thing that we didn't do together is the tapas, you know, the dough, so that you have the recipe. I already gave it to you. Okay. But so eventually I will have a video about how to make that as well. So once I have it, I'll share it with you, Casey, and then you can see how. All right. Enjoy your empanadas and nice to meet you all. Thank you. Bye.